Merry Christmas, everyone! Christmas is just like any other festival. It gets people in the mood for sharing gifts, sharing wishes, sharing food, sharing songs, sharing stories, for greater love, for greater hope, for greater life, and for greater goodwill, all in God's name. So it is fair to hear that Christmas has been associated with some of these occurrences. So let's talk about it!
Formed on Christmas Eve of 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee, the Ku Klux Klan holds its first gathering. The white sheet and hood were supposed to represent the ghosts of Confederate soldiers risen from the dead to seek revenge. The 6 founding members were classically educated and mainly of Scottish heritage, so they based the name on the Greek word kuklos, meaning circle. Harry T. Moore and Harriet V.S. Moore were some of the first activists of the civil rights movement to be assassinated in the United States. On the night of December 25, 1951, a bomb exploded in the Moores' house at 10:20 p.m. in Mims, Florida. The explosion was so loud that it was heard in Titusville, almost 5 miles away. After the attack, ambulances refused to transport a black person, so relatives drove Harriet and Harry 30 miles to Sanford in order to reach the closest hospital that didn't reject black patients. Despite the fact that multiple investigations concluded that the bombing was committed by the KKK, the murderers have never been identified or arrested. Harry had long been a target ever since he started working to register black voters in the 1930s and later turned his attention to fighting injustice in lynching cases, of which Florida had the most per capita compared to any other state at this time.
In the 1920s, Charlie Chaplin was cherished by audiences for having an immaculate eye for finding humor in the most tragic situations. In fact, he was so influential that imitators of his tramp persona, such as Billy Vest, achieved success. What makes Chaplin's death worth talking about on this list is not celebrating his legacy as a cultural icon, but it making waves in newspapers around 2 months later when 2 auto mechanics stole Chaplin's body and asked a ransom for $600,000.
After the fall of the Jin dynasty, Emperor Gwangbudi waged war against the regional warlords and rebel forces throughout China from 26 AD to 36 AD. By December of 36 AD, the Emperor Gwangbudi's Han forces had already reached Chengdu, although they were on the verge of abandoning it since their supplies were running out. Enter Emperor Gongsun Shu, who ruled over Chengxia, an empire formed in 25 AD that rivaled Gwangbudi's. Gongsun Shu died during the night of December 24th after being badly wounded from an offensive attack. On December 25th, Chengdu surrendered, effectively making Gwangbudi the master of China until his death in 57 AD. At 7 p.m. on Christmas Day in 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as the leader of the Soviet Union live on television. By the time Gorbachev resigned, he had already lost much of his power and by his own admission should have resigned earlier. Within half an hour, the red Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin for the final time, with a white, red, and blue Russian flag rising in its stead. Although Gorbachev said in his speech that he was deeply opposed to the dismembering of the unitary state, the next day the Soviet Union had already dissolved. Boris Yeltsin, who had been elected president of Russia in June 1990, was instrumental to the dissolution. Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus were the first to declare the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and they were followed by 11 more republics, with Georgia being the only exception. On Christmas Day of 2009, 289 passengers and crew board upon a flight from Amsterdam to Detroit. Amongst these is a 23-year-old Nigerian by the name of Umar Farouk Abdulmutallab, who attempted to detonate a bomb concealed in his underwear. Passengers reported hearing a noise like a firecracker, which turned out to be the sound of the bomb as it failed to detonate. Abdulmutallab was engulfed in a fireball and flames soon spread to the plane's carpet and walls. Fortunately, passengers were able to extinguish the flames and the plane landed without further incident. Later investigations determined that the attack was carried out to avenge the killing of innocent Muslims in the United States. Ultimately, a judge sentenced Abdulmutallab to life in prison. Thankfully, all of the passengers and crew were able to return to their families for the holidays. During the first Christmas of World War I, soldiers on both sides of the front in France and Flanders came out of the trenches, put down their weapons, and celebrated Christmas together. The German troops started singing Christmas songs in the trenches. Soon, the two sides were serenading each other and passing back and forth whiskey and cigars. There are even reports of football games being played during the Christmas truce, with at least 4 matches thought to have occurred between the armies. The soldiers knew the truce was temporary, but many sought to preserve the peace at least until midnight. Countless officers voiced their disapproval and tried to make sure that such an event never took place again.
And that's it for today. I'd like to thank my friend Libyan Mapping for helping me animate this episode. I'll bid you another farewell from another video, and I'll see you next time.